Welcome to the MindBod Adventure Pod, where every week we dive into a different practice, a different perspective on life, and you come along to try it with us. Join us on Substack at mindbodpod.com to watch this episode as a video podcast. And if you want to support our crazy adventures and get fun perks like our weekly after party videos, consider becoming a paid subscriber. And now, on to this week's adventure.
Oren J. Sofer, welcome to the MindBod Adventure Pod.
Welcome.
Hey, Jeff, Tasha. Happy to be here.
We're happy to be able to chat with you and practice with you. I'm just going to hold up this book. Your heart was made for this, which is excellent. I've been working my way through it, sometimes systematically, sometimes jumping ahead to a chapter to see what you're going to say about this, sort of organized by these different qualities of mind and heart that, as we pursue them, can kind of bring our life into a certain kind of alignment. And maybe that's a place to start, is for our viewers and listeners who don't know you, who you are and what got you interested in writing this book, and anything you want to say from there as we go into practice.
Sure. Who am I and why did I write this book? I am a husband and a father, first and foremost. I also teach meditation. I'm trained as a Buddhist meditation teacher, and I teach interpersonal communication. And having kids really shifted my perspective on things. I had wanted to write a book about bringing the qualities of the spiritual path into daily life for a long time. I started writing it during the pandemic when everything was going crazy and the earth shifted underneath all of us. And I was like, maybe I can start writing about how we can find more ground inside and not decompensate when we're all trapped inside. So the book started kind of from that place. And then when my wife and I got pregnant, it took on a different meaning, really thinking more deeply about how the skills of meditation specifically, but also contemplative practice more broadly, how those skills, well, first, if those skills are relevant, and then how they're relevant to the world that we're living in today, particularly as I, look ahead a generation to the world my kids are inheriting, and so many things that are coming apart at the seams. So, my aim for the book is really to give people inner resources to live the life they want to live and make a positive difference in the world. And I feel like the training and contemplative practice sets us up well for that. And both of you wanted to say something.
I wonder if we're going to say the same thing. What are you going to say?
Well, I was just going to say that what I like so much about the book is that you really integrate the internal and the external directed. It's so much about the engagement. It's about, yes, this quality, how it shows up on the meditation cushion, and always in every chapter, and this quality, how it shows up in a more engaged activist context and how to be with what's going on in the world. And that's just back and forth. That's the point to counterpoint, point, counterpoint. That is the dialectic of the book in a way, which was very refreshing to read, because so many of these books are just all about the kind of like the inward movement. What were you going to say?
I was going to say that I find so many of these books are kind of like journeys through, this is how it might be done, and this is how I did it one time. This, like, you said you were inspired by a time and a place that was really dire, and also this need to kind of like leave a legacy, for your children. And it felt kind of like a program for change and for living in this world, kind of like no nonsense. Here are ways, like here's a, you even said, read this over the course of a year and kind of like, give each chapter kind of like 2 weeks. And I love that, because so often we just read books and we're like, wow, that really transformed me. Bye,
Right.
Leave it. So I just really love the invitation to be like, let this transform you. Like, let this be a guide for living in this world.
Nice. Awesome. That makes me really happy to hear.
So you said difference between the meditation practice and contemplative practice more broadly. Do you want to go into that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. I liken the difference between meditation and contemplative practice to say like running and exercise. Like not everyone likes to run. Running's not actually good for everybody, but we all need to exercise in some way. Like our bodies need to move, right? So much depends on that. And in the same way, not everyone likes to meditate. Not everyone wants to meditate. These formal attentional training exercises we do are sort of like sitting still or walking back and forth, all of these, fairly odd forms culturally in the West. And yet we all need some way of connecting with our inner life. and finding a sense of meaning and value and purpose. So contemplative practice I see as anything that cultivates awareness and reflection and helps us step back. And I think it's a kind of medicine for our times because there's so much noise and so much fear and so much heartache and so much divisiveness that, I've been doing this for like 25 years and I get spun out and chewed up by looking at the news for 10 minutes. It's like we need some training to be able to hold our center and step back and make wise choices about what am I taking in, why, how do I respond, what's important to me, what do I think about this, like do I actually know anything about it to even have an opinion? And everything is pushing us in the other direction. So contemplative practice can be taking a walk in nature, having a cup of tea, reading a poem, those kinds of things, but it could also be folding the laundry with more love and intention, like thinking about your family as you do it, or cooking a meal with a lot of devotion to caring for your body and thinking about how this energy can nourish me and help me make someone else's life better. So it's not about what we're doing, but about the level of presence and intention we're bringing to the activity that makes something contemplative practice. And I love that because most of the people I know, at least, are so busy that it's hard to fit another thing in. But you don't need to fit another thing in to do contemplative practice. You just need to pay attention.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's pretty much the mission.
Yeah.
Is to explore those different things. But I think what's interesting about it as well is I actually see the skills you learn in a seated meditation practice kind of explicitly are often implicitly the ones that live in those other more freestyle contemplative practices. It's about equanimity, it's about concentration and energy, it's about awareness and clarity. And you can find that journaling, you can find that, it's about devotion, and that's what's one of the great things about your book is since it's organized around those qualities, there'll be discussion about meditation in it, but it's really just like you said, it's kind of about how to apply this in a more broad freelance way.
Yeah. Yeah, this could be a good moment to just kind of orient people to just the kind of basic structure of a chapter, which was kind of fun to think through because there's like 26 chapters, which is a lot in a certain way. I didn't want the chapters to be too long. So I wanted people to be able to sit down and read a chapter in, like 10 or 15 minutes, like one evening. It's not a big lift, but to not have it be kind of light or Pollyanna, that there's actually something to chew on there. So the chapter like looks at a quality like patience or energy or concentration and says like, what is the relevance of this in our lives personally? What is its relevance collectively? What are the like shadows or the pitfalls around this? And then each chapter ends with some practical instruction. So there's a reflection, something to just kind of turn over and think about or journal about. There's a meditation for those who want to take up meditation because I wholeheartedly encourage anyone who wants to meditate. I think it's a incredibly powerful way to get to know yourself and reorient your life. And then there's an action, something to actually do in your life. And then last, there's a section on what to do if you get stuck and have difficulties and kind of the common roadblocks that we tend to hit and some tips on how to engage in those.
You had a thought of guiding us in a couple different practices.
Yeah.
Do you want to say anything about that? And then I'll let you choose one to begin.
Yeah. So one of the things that was really neat about writing the book and thinking about all of these different traits or qualities is the way they interact and relate to each other. I kind of think about it like picture the human organism and consciousness as like a high fidelity stereo. You've got like the mid, the bass, the treble, and all the different. And so it's like you start to adjust these different qualities, like how much energy versus how much rest and like
push love all the way up at the mix.
Right. Yeah. And so a lot of them complement or balance each other. So I thought we could do one meditation on patience, which has softer aspects to it. There's an enduring quality to patience that is quite energetic, but tends to move into a space of more spaciousness, steadiness, softness. And then to do a meditation that balances that and to do one on courage, which is more energizing and engaging.
Yay.
So we could start with some patience.
Let's do it.
I guess the first thing I kind of want to say maybe before the meditation is maybe just to define patience, that it's not waiting. It's not kind of tensing up and gritting your teeth and resisting what's happening until it passes. That's called aversion. Patience actually allows us to tolerate discomfort without reacting. It's also not complacency. It's not being passive. Patience is what allows us to learn a craft, build a cathedral, build a social movement. It goes far. So patience is our ability to open to what is, whatever that is, without flinching or pulling away, and stay steady, which is radical because it goes against all of the messages and pressures of our instant gratification culture. So one of the things that I really loved about writing the chapter on patience was integrating these different aspects. That on the one hand, patience, it lets go of pushing and clinging and impatience, resistance, but it also has a certain commitment to it that holds on to whatever's important to us. So, when my son was much younger and not sleeping through the night yet, and I would go into his room and he would be crying and crying and crying, crying, 3 a.m, and I would be ready to lose my SHIT. I would practice patience. I would, just say in my mind over and over, just, okay, patience, patience. And, I was letting go of the frustration and the impatience and the like, just fall asleep, kid, I'm exhausted, but holding on to my love, holding on to my devotion, holding on to my commitment to being a steady, loving presence for this little vulnerable being. And so there's something beautiful about patience in that it works with both of those together.
Love that. I can relate to that too.
Yeah.
Don't think I quite managed to find exactly the right well springs of patience every time, but so it goes.
So should we do some practice?
Yeah, let's do it.
All right, great. So go ahead and settle in and establish your center. Maybe taking a deep breath, softening on the exhalation, relaxing the muscles in your face, your eyes, your jaw. Feeling the connection with the ground. Inviting the rootedness of a tree with the roots that go down into the earth. And that sense of strength and steadiness rising up inside. You might notice your breathing. And just inviting some patience with the rhythm of your breath. Giving yourself all the time you need for each in-breath, each out-breath. Just allowing the body to breathe, letting it come, letting it go. And then as we sit quietly, you might just bring to mind an image that represents patience for you. So some people like to think of a natural image like a great lake, a vast mountain, or maybe an ancient tree. It could be someone you know that really embodies patience, or a historical figure that you've read about. Basically anything that evokes that sense of steady, enduring presence of patience. A mountain weathering the storms, a redwood tree standing for thousands of years. It doesn't have to be the perfect image, just whatever comes to mind. And begin to see or sense it clearly in your mind's eye. Its different qualities, how it appears to you. Imagine yourself right there with that lake, that mountain, tree or person, a vast sky, whatever it is. And notice how it feels inside to behold this. Almost like the tissues and the cells in your body could begin to entrain with the steadiness and the patience of this image, its ability to endure steadily. It might even help to just use a soft, simple phrase like boundless patience or infinite patience. So just evoking the felt sense of the quality and then lingering with it, just letting its effect move through your mind and body. Coming back to the image, the felt sense of it, and then lingering, just letting it in. And to any degree that you're touching into some sense of patience, you might take like a picture with your mind, like a 3D holographic Polaroid in your mind and body, just remembering this place of rootedness, spaciousness, however it feels for you to see that image, to be connected to a sense of patience. And you can come back here anytime and touch into it and receive its support one moment at a time. And whenever you're ready, you can bring some movement into your body. Slowly let the eyes open.
You know what the first image for me was of patience? I didn't stick with it. I switched it out, but it was like a wrapped present box. Because
Oh.
like when you're a kid and like it's like your birthday or Christmas and you just really want to rip into this present. It's like sitting under the Christmas tree or something. And I think that was my first like lesson in patience, of just being like, not today, present. Just like looking, like it's okay. I'll get to open it someday. But then I settled on a gigantic redwood because it's a little bit more eternal.
How'd the practice go for you?
Yeah, I love that. There's something really special about connecting to like a scale of time that is so vastly beyond human time,
Yeah.
like a mountain or a tree or something. And it's just like has this way of pulling things into perspective.
Yeah, I used to think of my old teacher Shinzen Young used to have a line about slowing down your body clock,
Yeah.
And I mean, actually, this is a very familiar meditation to me because I'm impatient by nature. I'm very energetic and impulsive, and I start every single meditation I ever do with a version of this where I just connect into this. For me, it's like the statue of a Buddha. And then, 'cause I make it part of the, when I take refuge, I just kind of like picture, and it's so slowed down. It's this enduring stone, like you describe. It's sort of like this weathered stone, 3,000 years old or whatever it is, 2,000 years old. It's got moss, and it's like a data yoga practice. You just sort of become that, and you really, the whole inside just, it's just like there's no activity. It's so calming.
Yeah, but I find the
Yeah.
part of the reason why I didn't choose like a mountain or something is that to me that had this kind of like cold and different quality.
Yeah.
Whereas like for me anyway, I really like the living warmth of like the tree. They had this, it almost has this like parental quality. Like patience has this parental quality where like you're like the kid trying to rush around and get everything done. And then there's this other being that's making space for you and kind of showing you with their own nervous
Yeah.
system how, the
Yeah.
expanse of time
Well,
is,
it's very funny you're saying that, because that's actually a question I was going to ask you, Oren, and ask you as well, Tasha, is when we're doing something like this, because as I was doing it, just what you said, I had a sudden thought of like, it's related, is, am I imposing this on me, or am I finding this part of me? When I think about healing from like a parts perspective or something like a internal family systems, or it would be, look at what's the part that's impatient and try to understand what that's about, and try to address and heal and look at that so that that can move out on its own, and then this more natural patience just emerges. So as opposed to saying, oh, I'm going to impose patience on myself here. I mean, have you thought about that, or how do you think about when these, maybe that's a false dialectic to put it up like that?
No, I think that's a really appropriate question. And I think it's both, because we need patience to observe impatience. Like ironically, like the way to patience is through impatience. You don't develop patience without feeling impatience. You don't develop generosity without feeling some stinginess. And I think dialectic is the right word because they play off of each other. And my approach, which is very much informed by like trauma informed work and nervous system process, is to nourish the healthy aspects and build that kind of inner reservoir, and then allow that to hold and digest and understand and metabolize the difficult bits. So the whole book is framed, around these positive qualities, not because I'm trying to avoid the fear and the anger and the grief and the rage and the confusion, but actually because I think oftentimes if we try to just go into those, we drown. They're too much. And we do actually have this capacity to cultivate and draw on these incredibly powerful resources. And there's a subtlety there that I think you're pointing to around like the kind of toxic positivity we find in sort of secular mindfulness and pop culture of like, just be mindful, just be patient, everything will be fine. And that's not what this is about. It's actually like, no, okay, touch into patience, learn what that is, and then deal with the mess, right? And then we use that to actually engage with the part that's like screaming like, will you just hurry up? What about you, Tasha?
That's something that I really liked about your book as well, is focusing on the antidotes of things. It's not so much about positivity, but it's also not about like, ways in which you're an asshole. It's more like cultivate these things. They end up becoming the antidotes for parts of you that are painful. And that's like really relevant to me because that's actually how one of the main moments in my life where I just really ripped myself into practice was I found myself being just very competitive and jealous and a career wise and like the art and entertainment world. And it was, I hated the feeling of being jealous. Like I would hear a new piece of music and I'd be like, I could have made that better, or I'd be like, I wish I made that. And it had this quality of just really making my heart feel tight. And thankfully, like the practice that I had before that was enough so that I could notice that in myself and notice that I disliked it so much. But then I started Googling around for like, what is the antidote to this feeling? And it was like love, like joy in other people's things and all these qualities that sound really nice, but until you realize that they are like a bomb for your own self, you don't really cultivate them, right? So that's one thing that I really appreciated about your book, because that was my personal experience. I think it's so helpful to think of it in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Thanks. I appreciate that.
Curious how you would guide the practice on courage.
Yeah. Maybe we talk about courage a little bit first.
I was just gonna
Yeah,
say, let's
absolutely.
define courage. What is courage to you?
Um, Courage is the ability to be present and still act in the face of fear. I think that there's this false idea that courage means not being afraid. But actually, for me, it's quite the opposite. It's that ability to really show up even when we're afraid and respond, act in line with our values. There's a certain vitality to it. Sometimes fear is unfounded. Sometimes it's just, our mind creating phantoms. But other times it's a natural and appropriate response to some kind of risk or danger. And so there's a certain kind of fullness to being alive in that. It's like standing on the edge of a cliff. It's like you feel the precariousness of life and the uncertainty. And to be present with that takes a lot of courage.
It's very hard to do what you're describing because, I mean, from just to speak personally, if I feel unsafe in a situation, like I'm scared, I have a hard time acting coherently because my amygdala takes over. And I would say I'm in an argument with someone and I don't feel safe because the person's just got a lot of strong opinions, or that doesn't bring out the best in me. It'll shut me down and I won't be able, and I have an emotional reaction. I either get really angry or I get really scared or I get combative or whatever, and then it's like I'm reacting, not responding. I can want to have all the courage in the world in that moment, but then I have a nervous system that's going to be doing what it's doing.
Totally, which is why we need other qualities to access courage, right? So mindfulness is the first one that's going to come in and help us just step back and pause and actually assess. Like how much of this is my mind amplifying a threat? How much of this is just kind of like the evolutionary tendency to freak out in order to try to stay safe? How much of this is rooted in reality? So courage starts with just that ability to first just take a pause, step back, and then get some perspective, which is about wisdom, actually assessing like, well, what is going on here? What is actually needed? And it's kind of like woven within that, there's already the seed of courage. Because even to pause, even to be present and willing enough to say, hang on a sec, what's really going on here? Requires this kind of rising up of some energy and some willingness, which is to me that manifestation of courage. Courage comes from the word core for heart, right? So it's like letting our heart come forward and actually meet what's happening. And then the wisdom piece gets some perspective. Is okay, what do I need to do here? Like, am I in danger? Do I need to cut out or set a limit? Or no, this person's upset. They're scared too. I can deactivate this situation. Let me try to offer some understanding, right? So actually have a different response.
Mm-hmm. I was thinking of it in terms of like that example of courage is kind of like a sudden surprise. Like something happens and there's this choice that can be made or not made. And I think also of like the kind of courage that is necessary right now culturally, people making choices to vocalize their stance on an issue or to protest, and everyone has different levels of things to be lost. Like some people are afraid for their jobs if they speak out and stuff. And so for me, that kind of courage, I'm so happy that you said it comes from the word core, like heart, because to me, it's like what gives me that kind of courage, or when that courage kind of flourishes in me, it's that one of these like qualities has been developed so that it's louder and clearer than my own ego, or that there's like this, internal kind of value system or something that just is a little bit more solid than the fear or like the ego, or like not that ego is a bad thing, it's what keeps us alive, but just kind of like this beacon that you're like, I am scared, but that is bright and I'm moving towards that. I think there's like the two different kinds of qualities of courage, or like two different
Two
many.
different facets based on the context.
Yeah.
Yeah, something immediate versus something that's more considered or ongoing. And in that latter example you're giving, Tasha, for me, I think a lot about values. Like, what are my values? What's guiding me? The example that I give in the book was just the decision to have kids, and like how much courage I think it takes today. And I think the amount of courage it takes to have children is like inversely proportional to the amount of privilege and access to resources we have. The poorer you are, the more subjected you are to institutional violence and oppression. It's like the more courage it takes to bring a child into the world, knowing like what they're going to face and what access to power or resources you have. And me, like, being white and male and in a heterosexual couple and living in the United States, like all of the various things that I have, and still feeling like, wow, this is really scary to think about bringing a new life into the world with everything that's happening. And then to imagine how much courage it takes to do it, like living somewhere where there's food insecurity or there isn't clean water or sanitation or healthcare. It's just, yeah. And so then it's like, yeah, like what's important to us? What does love say? What does our heart say?
That's why you made the decision. You listened to what your heart said.
It was integrated. Yeah, it was a lot of different things. Some of it was about wanting to be fully open to life. Like this image came to me in my meditation of a door opening when my wife said, I think I want to have a child. I was like, I'm not going to like walk away. I'm going to go through that door, like, so like some of it was that, just this natural movement into the unknown and wanting to live fully. Some of it was about wanting to make my wife happy. I love her and I couldn't imagine saying no to her. Just like she really wants this and I want nothing else than for her to be happy. I'm not going to stand in the way of that. I'm like, no. Right. And then I had a conversation with a really good friend of mine who's a longtime activist and social justice organizer. And I was talking a lot about, the climate and the amount of resources a human being in the United States uses. And he said this one thing that really, I give a shout out to Eric Roman, that really changed things for me on that level. He said, I don't think the world is going to be worse off for you having a child. And I was just like, oh, he's right. Like, I have a lot of confidence in my wife and my ability to like raise a good human and instill them with really good values and a lot of skill. And, like, I feel like we need people who are well regulated and loving and compassionate and nonviolent. And I was like, yeah, this is probably like a good thing to invest all this energy and resources in this being. Is overall probably going to be a net gain for the planet.
Yeah, it sounds kind of like it's the courage of just facing the unknown, right? Like you're just taking a leap.
Yeah.
We can try and figure it all out and like get all of our ducks in a row and do as much research as possible. But at the end of the day, it's the courage is like, do you jump or not?
Right. Yeah. I think for me, the courage piece, I'm glad you said that because it brought back like what for me took the most courage was around the vulnerability and the risk of loss and pain. And, like I had meditated enough and just understood the human condition enough to know that like this just has the potential to destroy me and rip me apart the way nothing else I have ever faced can. And I was just like, okay, am I really signing up for that? It was just the pain. And so it took courage to open to that
Yeah.
vulnerability and say, yeah.
And the other side of that too is like, as a person who's not going to have children, the courage there is like, everyone is like, but when you're old, you'll have no one. And I'm like, I believe that I'm not going to be the kind of person that will be surrounded by nobody. I want to be surrounded by my friends' kids and whatever. And I'm willing to place my trust in community to not hang me out to dry as an old woman, but it's also a leap of faith.
Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah.
So that being said, you tell Sasha and Eden. They got responsibilities to their aunt Tasha.
But it's what you said there, though. It's true. Like I think if I had known, I mean, I must have known on some level the stakes of being a parent. Of course, you do, but you really, holy shit! I mean, that vulnerability. It's just like, oh my god, I have I feel the way I describe being a parent, it's like 10 times the pain, 1/10 the control. Like their hurts hurt you 10 times more than your own hurts, but you can't control them. You can barely control yourself, but you really can't control them. So it's just like this complete surrender into what you know is going to be just heartache after heartache. And that definitely takes courage.
I want to kind of riff off what both of you are saying, and just, I don't know, to me, this is just such an important quality, and it's one that I find myself drawing on a lot. In fact, the whole book it's challenging for me that I wrote this book because because now I'm like practicing with it, It's like, well, you're the guy who wrote the book. And so like I find like I need like so much of the things that are in here every day, and courage is a huge one. And I just have this sense that to be alive on the planet right now, if you're doing it right, just requires a tremendous amount of courage to just open our eyes and open our hearts to all that's happening, and there's tremendous beauty and wonder and grace alongside the horror and the devastation. And it's so much to take in. And so whether it's the choice to have kids or to not have kids, it's just like, I feel like to be awake on the planet today just demands immense courage.
Immense.
So what's the practice for that?
All right. Well,
yeah, let's dive in. What have you done, Oren?
Just put the fear into Jeff.
All right. So taking up your posture, however that is for you. Allowing things to come into balance. Softening the muscles, the tissues, softening the heart a little bit. Just allowing ourselves to rest. And what would it be like to just put everything down right now? And allow ourselves that gift of being exactly as we are, right here and now. And can there be any sense, however small, of ease, rest, or relaxation? So just touch that for a moment with your heart. Some sense that it's okay. And then in your own time, when you're ready, you can bring to mind something just slightly challenging, not too hard. Situation, conflict, problem, question. We'll make it something specific and real. And as it comes to mind, notice any resistance, pulling away, wanting to fix it, or just not wanting it to be here. Challengingness of it, friction of it, that might manifest as some tension or contraction in your body. It could be like a foggy, floating sensation, or even like a flurry of thoughts distracting from it. So there's the challenge, and then there's however your heart, mind, are relating to it. Pulling away, shutting down, avoiding, rushing towards it to fix it. It's natural to want to avoid discomfort. See if you can notice just the strength of heart it takes to acknowledge any pulling away from or trying to obliterate the challenge, the resistance. And you might even invite the image or sense of a wise, loving elder or being, kind of mentor, parental figure, kind of guide, to be there with you with the challenge. A being that embodies a sense of courage and strength. You can see the steadiness in their eyes, you can feel it in their voice or their demeanor. As a way of reminding you of your own capacity for courage to just turn towards the challenge and feel whatever comes. To hold steady in the face of any shakiness, resistance, or reaction. Just taking it one breath at a time, staying steady, staying engaged. Meeting each thought, each feeling, each moment, just as it is. It takes courage to breathe and see clearly. I'm afraid. I don't want this. It's too much. It's their fault. Whatever comes. So just see it clearly and know it as it is. You don't need to fix it. You don't need to make anything happen other than to know it right now. Notice how it feels to recognize this capacity for courage in your heart. And you might just acknowledge whether or not there's anything to come back here to learn, ask, or listen to. Anything else that you want to revisit and spend more time with. And then whenever you're ready, you can begin to bring some movement into your body, wiggle your toes or sway a little bit. And slowly let the eyes open.
Ready to take on the world.
Victory mudra.
The last part of that I didn't offer because there isn't really enough time. But like if we had taken more time in the end, then I think there's also this important process of like, no, what's needed here? Right? Like sometimes there's an action.
Yeah.
I was like, I got to call them back and say, hey, that's not complete. We need to talk about this. Or I got to write a letter to the dean and, this needs to change. Or so there's that last step of, does this now inform some action now that I've really seen clearly what's going on inside?
Well, I like that you're saying that because I think most people think about courage as what you're describing as the first step, but actually identifying, I found it very helpful to just have you point out that just being with this hard thing and noticing that is itself courageous. And I could actually feel the energy of it. It's just like this upward moving quality of being present. that had a kind of courageous carriage inside that. It didn't feel brave or raw, it just felt centered. And to have that named as courageous, I was like, oh yeah, that is courageous.
Yeah, and I think, you just mentioned that action part is usually people's first reaction. And that had me thinking as well, like, so much of what we think of as courageous action is actually just like a mad dash to soothe our nervous systems.
Oh
It's
yeah,
like
totally.
it's lashing out because you don't know what else to do, right? Whereas if you really were able to sit with the feeling, then a more wise action might come out of it. And also, like, as I was sitting in the meditation, my difficult thing was I got to go home for like a week, like, live with my family for a week, which doesn't sound, or maybe it does. That sounds frightening to a lot of people, I think.
A
And then,
week's a long time.
yeah, it's exactly, that's what it is. I can go home for a day or two. And I'm like, wow, I'm gonna sleep in my childhood bed, and there's like just like trauma of having grown up in a place, and some really deep traumas actually, and knowing that I'm going to do it anyway, right? Like the choice, I've already made the choice. And so when you were bringing our attention to that feeling, I realized like that's what because I know it's difficult and that I'm going to do it anyway, I've been kind of just like silencing that feeling just as kind of like a knuckling through, I guess. But even just making some space for that. And I think it's a part of it is because there's kind of like this unconscious belief that if I make space for that feeling, maybe I'll psych myself out and I won't actually do it and I won't go home for a week. But just actually making space for it and being like, this is a valid feeling that I'm having and I'm still going to go. And then it had this like effect of kind of making it like not solely my responsibility to go home and have a good time. That it's like I might go home and there might be times where I have to just be like, I'm gonna just take some space. Or maybe ask someone else to act differently in a certain situation, because I need that. My nervous system needs that. So just like kind of broadened the scope of outcomes I could even imagine having there. It's like not just going to be all on me to make it a fine time. It's kind of yes, and I'm going home, and I may need accommodations.
Totally. Yeah, I can ask for what I need. Right. Yeah, I was just gonna add to where you started, Tasha, of just like I think that the most common depiction of courage in popular culture is that reactive, like the hero vanquishing and banishing the bad guys and just this kind of violent overreaction, right? Like that's courage, is you just tackle it and destroy it.
That rarely comes up. Like, when are we
Yeah.
actually called to like behead somebody with our sword, right? It's more like,
Yeah.
can you have this difficult conversation? Can you go
Mm-hmm.
home for the holidays? Can you something
Yeah.
that sounds very mundane, but it is extremely activating for a person.
Can you share your true feelings with someone? Can you tell them how much you love them and open your heart and say, it's, this scares me how much I feel for you, right? That takes a lot of courage. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually kind of touched into the healing part of it too, because I had a similar thing because we were talking about family before, so that was in my head, and I could really feel this thing that comes up sometimes where I just feel like I can't actually do this. I can't bear. I went right to the biggest thing. I can't bear this. Really feeling I can't do this, and just having and feeling where that was in my body, and being able to just sit with that and just being able to let it be there. I could feel. I started having the purification. I get this very vivid when something's burning off or something's and I get tearing starts and I can feel like yawning starts, and I just felt the energies start to integrate just from sitting there and being with them. So this is like part of the medicine of mindfulness, of awareness. I mean, awareness is a kind of solvent too. It's an integrator, and I felt more healthy coming out of it. So
Yeah, and I love that you use that word. Both of you use the word medicine, and Tashi used the word antidotes. And I really kind of feel like all the different qualities are, it's like this different alchemical medicine cabinet in our heart. And it's like, do we know that we actually have access to all of these different potent qualities? It can be like, like envy. Oh, like a bit of gratitude, a little bit of joy. Like you can dissolve it, or like sheer terror and panic. It's like, okay, what's needed here? Right? We can
Yeah.
develop all of these beautiful healing potencies inside.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah,
I love
I
that.
really
That's
like
a
that
great
idea.
way to finish this. Well, any last things you want to say about that medicine cabinet inside?
Maybe we can just to circle back with the whole integration of inner and outer and individual and collective. My message sort of with the book is that we don't have to choose between self-care, spirituality, and social change, that they need each other. And yeah, focus on what we can do, right? Take care of ourselves, listen for what's important to us, and then show up, right? Offer what we can. And there's so much that we can't do anything about, but there are things that we can do, and that's empowering. It reduces anxiety, it gives us energy, and it creates momentum.
And if our listeners want to connect with you or do a course with you, or what
Yeah,
where can they find you?
sure. My website's the best place to stay in touch and find out what's going on, orenjsofer.com. I have an email list. I don't send emails very often because of the family life, so you will not get your inbox flooded. But anytime I'm doing an online retreat, or I do online classes and communication, next year I'll be doing something around the book, having some sessions and exploring the topics and meditation. So folks can find out about all that at my website. Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you so much. This is like, feels so much better. This is like such a
really
healing
fun.
hour.
Great to hang out, Oren.
Awesome. Yeah. Thanks for having me. It's great to talk to both of you.
And now, join us for the after party at mindbodpod.com, where me and Jeff talk candidly about whatever didn't get said in this week's episode, and chat in the comments with the whole MindBod squad. Don't forget to subscribe for new episodes every week, and if you want to support our crazy adventures, consider becoming a paid subscriber on Substack at mindbodpod.com. See you there.